Welcome to Tell Me a Story. I'm Adina Samuels, and I'm inviting anyone and everyone to share their stories with me. Let's see what we get.
Edward Chow, welcome to Tell Me a Story. I'm super excited to have you here. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Edward Chow. I'm the son of an amazing immigrant by the name of Josephine Chan. She brought us over in 1995, which I'm super fortunate for. I'm also a shower singer, as well as a bedroom instrument, guitar, bass player. Um, yeah.
That's the best intro I've gotten so far. Definitely. Yeah. Is that what you say when you go to like networking events?
Hell no, but I'm not attached to my work. That's one of the great things about the New Year's. I think I had a lot of introspection. I had a lot of me time, really, and just realizing who I am, what I like to do, is totally different than what I do in my 9 to 5.
Okay, that's a whole conversation on its own. Maybe we'll tie that in somehow. But Edward, as you know, the rules are you bring a story, you tell the story. What do you got for me today?
All right, let's see where my head is at. I think there were about three stories that came to mind. But I really wanted to share something deep and personal. I think that was number one, the most important criteria. Number two, to be vulnerable. I think, I guess, sorry to go on a tangent. You'll cut this out. But I was in an Uber last night because it was my company's New Year's holiday party, and I always
Oh.
have the best chats. And I always take something away, and so I want to make sure that what I'm sharing today was as meaningful and as informative as my conversation last night with Malik, an amazing
Okay, I
driver.
just have to tell you a really quick Uber story because if you get to go on tangents, then so do I. A couple years ago, I went on a date that didn't go so well.
Okay.
And I took an Uber ride home and I was just kind of processing the date and I was confused because I didn't understand why it didn't go well. Anyway, I see the Uber guy is this young-ish guy and I'm like, we have quite a long ride together and I say to him, I just say, "Excuse me, do you mind if I just process my night with you?"
Wow.
And he's like, okay.
Great answer.
and, and so I start telling him about this guy and like the backstory and the date and why I feel weird about it. And he looks at me, turns around, he says, I know exactly what this guy is doing. I used to be this guy,
Okay.
you know? And then we talk about his dating stories and all this stuff. He finds out I'm a writer. He tells me that he won some poetry competition in Pakistan when he was, 10. Can he send me the poem?
Yeah.
I was like, of course. I'd love to read your poem. He sends me the poem. Eventually, we actually go on a date, which is so funny. We went on like two or three dates, and we're still friends ish. But it's like my best Uber story, actually.
Okay. Well, that beats what I took away last night. But what's funny when you're talking through that, when you said I used to be that guy, when your Uber driver said that, now friend, I'm like, was that like a bad thing or a good thing? The
Yeah, I think it
delivery
was a
in this
bad.
conversation. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think it was a bad thing. Like it was more just like like playing games, in like dating, you play games, you don't
Okay.
answer, you lead people on, all that stuff. Like he was saying like he really understood the guy's perspective and that I should run. And
Oh,
then obviously run into this guy's arms is what he
right.
wanted.
Wow. This what a charmer, to say the
Big
least.
time. The poetry, the door-to-door service.
It feels like it should be a Hollywood movie circa 2001.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Patent pending. Anyway, okay,
All
Edward, your
right.
story.
The story I want to share, and I will try to do this um, as smoothly as I can, given that the one that comes to mind is pretty emotional. So there is some kind of ground to lay over here. Um, my mom brought us over in 1995. I was about 11 months old, and she brought my brother
From
and I
where?
from Hong Kong. Sorry, we came from Hong Kong. My brother and I came. We went to Vancouver first, and then we ended up finding our way in Ontario, where my cousins and uncles were. But she raised us from a very young age to today. Let me just find my words. Uh, but in 2006, my brother did find out my dad wasn't being very loyal, and it wasn't his first time doing this. And so I grew up with a lot of resentment, with a lot of anger. As a youth, I channeled that anger through music, right? And so I found my way into guitar and bass. I was in a metal band when I was a young lad. Played a couple shows in Toronto with some good
Amazing. And I've
friends.
played music with you. You are definitely really good. I mean, I haven't heard the metal variety, but
Still working on it is what I always say to my friends. And I think at that moment, when everything sort of, I don't want to say crumbled, but when everything shifted in my life, I actually had this, and again, being someone that knows two languages very well, sometimes it's very hard to find the English word for things. So it might come off strong or it might come off too weak, but sort of like a vengeance, so to speak, that like, hey, you did this, you sort of left us, so it's now my job to succeed in life and to show you that look how great my mom did with the two of us. Um,
did your dad come over to Canada with you?
Right. See, we're missing the little bits. So my mom brought us over, but my dad decided to stay in Hong Kong to pursue his career. Very hardworking man. I remember, I think it was like in his 50s or 40s. He actually got his MBA. So very career driven, career focused. And I really admire, like today, I really admire that. As a kid, I didn't. And so yeah, he stayed in Hong Kong. My mom took care of us. My brother's a little more of a rascal than me. I'm always the good child, taking care of mom, making sure she's got that support, and that was sort of indirectly her support, right? So
And your brother's younger than you, so
my brother's older. My brother is
oh, I didn't
10
expect that.
to 11 years older.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay, and he's the rascal. You had to keep him in line.
he's the rascal. I kept him in line. Yeah, I'm. Maybe it was the fact that it was my mom and I, so I felt that need to kind of grow up quickly. I remember hearing from another employer in the past that, wow, you were a very old soul for a new grad. And so maybe that's where it all
Hmm.
comes from.
And do you know if your brother felt that same anger towards your father?
Um, I think, like many East Asian cultures, we don't talk too much. We don't get too emotional or too intimate, or we don't connect in that way. It's sort of, I have your back indirectly. So I'm really not sure. But where the story goes is, and I'm trying to find the words right now, but when I was about 22 years old, my dad, and at this point, I didn't really talk to him when everything crumbled, and then my mom started to find another partner, which didn't last too long. But when she did do that, he sort of just left. He's like, hey, I guess in that culture, if someone else is taking care of the family, then it's like I don't have to do anything.
Mm.
So in 2020, well, not 2022, but when I was 22 years old, my dad texted my brother and said, I'm going to be in Toronto. And I was like, oh,
Whoa.
is this my chance to let out all the anger, all the thoughts? And
How long had it been since you last interacted with him?
probably over 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah, at that point, over 10 years. And he would try to reach out. And back then it was email in the 90s and early 2000s. And I just never replied. I'll be honest. I just never replied. It didn't feel right to me. And so it's been 10 plus years, a lot of anger, a lot of thoughts. I think as a kid, you're like, you know what? If I saw him, I would say X, I would do Y. And so there was this sort of event coming up where my brother flew in from, I think at that time, maybe he was in somewhere in Western Canada. And so he would actually fly into Toronto. And there was a date, there's a time. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. Like, I need to let this out.
And this was going to be you, your brother, and your dad
My dad
meeting.
in a hotel room.
Oh,
uh, yeah, and he was here for work, really, and not trying to paint a bad picture, but he's very career driven. So everything had to line up in certain ways and just had to make sense. And so that was the big moment. My dad was there. My brother, we parked the car in the parking to paint the scene. My brother and I
Yeah.
drove over to the hotel. We parked the car. We walked in. I was cool. I was like calm. And we're in the lobby waiting and waiting. My brother's trying to get a hold of him through the phone. It's like, where the hell is dad? And then he shows up, and he, of course, in his traditional fashion, as I know him, everything's fine. Smiles, gifts, plays that image that, nothing happened and we're all okay. We go up to the hotel room, and we sit on a bench by the doors. Typically, I guess where you take off your shoes, you hang your coat, not your joke, your coat, and silence for about 20-25 minutes.
Well,
Um, and I think at that point I realized how hard it is to take a sip of coffee. Of course, redirecting my emotions. It's what I do
yeah,
best.
yeah.
I realized how hard it is to actually say things that's been brewing up. And my brother started with his side, things that happen, and I just stayed silent.
What was going through your mind? Did you just feel kind of like paralyzed or?
That's a really good word. Paralyzed is the exact word. Not how I thought I would have this confrontation, because I sort of built it up, right? Here are the
Did you
things I'm going to
plan
say.
like what you
I
wanted to say?
You know me well enough. I did plan some key points, and I think at the end of it, the core is like why. Why did you do the thing that you did? And how do you feel now? Because things were sort of, they went on the other side. They sort of got shaken up, at least from the family side. I was just paralyzed. I couldn't talk. When I tried to talk, the delivery was like me trying to tell you the story, very choked up.
Mm.
And I think at that point, I realized all this anger, all this resentment should probably just be let go. It's not worth it. People grow up, people go through things. Um, I'm sure he had his reasons. I'm sure things weren't perfect. And this is all happening in the moment. Like, who am I to judge? I can't. I could be angry. I have every right to be angry. But in today's landscape, and in that moment, like, can you just let it go and be in the moment with this
You
person?
thought that while you were seeing your dad after not seeing him for 10 years, barely able to get a word out, you came to this like
Yeah,
realization.
yeah. That's what happened in the moment. Just this rush of emotions, all these thoughts, and just sort of you hit the peak. You're redlining your car, right? And then all of a sudden you just let off, because you're like, what am I doing? Is this worth it? Is this worth your energy, your time? Is it time to let go of all this anger? And I think, not now, I'm going to spin it a little. I think what was really good about the anger was it drove me. It drove me to do better. It drove me to study harder, to learn new things, to prove like one day that, like, hey, we didn't need your help. All right. That's really my mentality. And I was scared of forgiving my father because I didn't want to lose that fire in me.
Mm.
Um, and in that moment, I sort of just thought, just be here, be in the moment. It sucked before, but maybe this is a chance to um, to to build some sort of relationship before it's too late.
So you said that when you were kind of having this moment with yourself, you came to the realization that it wasn't worth it to hold on to the anger and the resentment. Um, and when I heard that, I thought that meant that you didn't want to, you just like he wasn't worth your energy. But it sounds like what you were actually hoping for is to rebuild with him. Is that right?
It's really interesting how my mind works. Where in some parts of me, I want to rebuild. At that time, I wanted to rebuild. At the end, like I just want a dad. You know, that's really the simple part. And on the other side, I wanted to investigate. I want to know what happened. And then the other side, I'm like, I just wanted to forget as well. Like you haven't been here. Why are you? Why are you occupying this space? Why are you taking my energy? And so I guess I never committed to what I wanted, but in that moment, it seemed like what I wanted at that time, and I still do. It's still a little choppy, but what I did want was just to rebuild or try to build something before it's too late.
And when you saw your that so you left Hong Kong, you were 11 months. So obviously you didn't have like strong memories of time together with him.
No.
When you saw him, did you feel like that feeling like when you're around family or like, people you know or people who know you, like how did it feel to see someone who in a traditional sense should know you probably best out of everyone, but barely really knows you at all?
Yeah. So growing up, you're definitely right. Though he stayed in Hong Kong and though we were in Canada, as a child, we would actually visit every year, be
Okay,
it the
okay.
summer or be it the winter. As I started growing up, it became more phone calls. I can only imagine as I grew up, it's probably when his career started taking off as well. And so trips became phone calls became emails.
Hmm.
And then eventually it was radio silent, sort of when things changed. And yeah, when I saw him, it's weird. You know it's dad, but it doesn't feel like dad. And I don't know. Maybe that's the best way I can describe it. So when I saw him, I was like, "Hey, there's a person. Cool. That's number one. But number two, he's your biological father. He is family. So then you have some feelings, and then afterwards, I sort of pull back because I'm like, but what is a dad? What is the meaning of a dad? What is the meaning of a father? What does that mean to me? And so in that aspect, then I start to pull back and like, hey, hold on. Like, though you look like that person, I associate dad or mom or parents as just looking at my mother.
Hmm.
So that's sort of what was in my mind at that time.
And in my kind of imagination, I'm picturing him in like a business suit, sitting on the corner of the bed, like slumped over. Like what was going on for him during this experience?
So we all sat on the we all sat on the bench where
Just
you
like
take off
three
your
in a
shoes,
row.
three in a row. Yeah, um, I guess the room was big enough to accommodate for three people on one bench. What was he wearing? Yeah, let's paint a picture. I probably showed up in like a t-shirt and jeans. My brother probably the same. He likely had a polo or a white dress shirt, and probably something more casual like chinos at the bottom. Um, Maybe I'll start there. So when we did walk in, and before the lack of conversation from me, we walked in, and um, we everyone sat down, and in his typical fashion, he always brings gifts. So he opened this big, checked luggage, and like, oh, here's this for you, here's this for you.
What did he bring you?
He brought toys, like I don't want to say children, but like two or three items were like very kiddish.
And you were 22, your
And I was
brother was
22.
33.
Correct. Yeah. There's that. He also brought some, I don't want to use that word, but he brought some cheap watches. Just like, hey, like you have this, have that. And then afterwards, it was like, okay, cool, whatever. I never cared for these gifts. I think as a kid, I just wanted someone to be there. But that's what happened. Opened up the thing, and then he was like, "Okay, so what do you, what are we doing? Like, what do you want to talk about?" My brother starts because I'm radio silent. He has his piece, and then I try to say something. And I think the first thing was why, like what happened and why. And when he started to talk and share his side, it just didn't make sense to me. It felt like an act. It felt like we were in the office. It felt like some sort of chatter just to like brush this away, sort of thing. And I wanted to investigate more, but there was this little boy inside of me that said, "Just stop. Like, it's not worth it. He's here now. You're alive. He's alive. So put it past you," essentially. And probably my speaking time lasted maybe 10 minutes, though it felt like 4 hours. And after that, so we had that discussion. I'm now trying to remember those finer details. He talks more about the relationship with my mother back in the day, why he did what he did. Well, not why he did what he did, but why he went radio silent, which was, hey, if your mom starts seeing someone else, like, I don't know about Canada, but like for us in our culture, it's like, well, clearly sort of like I've been replaced, which is kind of the wrong word in English, but like there's someone else there now. So maybe I can take a step back, so to speak. And I'm like, okay, we have the discussion, and I believe we just left afterwards. And I just,
Did he
yeah.
seem like uncomfortable, or was it like, when you said it, it felt like an office meeting, like he had kind of he knew his talking points kind of thing?
He seemed very relaxed, and he seemed sort of ready to share. And I think, and I don't know, the preparedness could be because he's lived through this. He knows the story well. He's been through it. Or it's like, hey, this is what I've shared with other people, whether it's other family or it's like other coworkers. I don't know.
Hmm.
So yeah, he was very relaxed the whole time.
And then that feeling, that kind of shift in motivation on your end, did that remain after
It
you left?
it did. When I when I hung my head down low in the car, staring at my feet, um, I was like, "You built up this image. You built up this image of him and of yourself and what you would say, and maybe now is the time to just let it go." And it stuck with me, and it still stays with me, no matter how hard it is. Um, and I will say this: I think when I hit 22 and a half, 23, I like formally forgave him in my head, like in my heart. I was like,
What did that look like? What do you mean?
meaning that anything I was told as a child, anything that happened when I was a kid, that I would just put it past me and sort of look to the future and say, try to build something as uncomfortable and as awkward as it is, before it's too late.
That's like a really mature thing for a 22-and-a-half-year-old to
Is it?
decide. Yeah, like I mean, I think that's what everyone would tell you should try to do, you know? Um, so how did that, after the conversation with your dad, were you in contact, or did you need time to reflect and then come to that conclusion?
After that, my dad did try to reach out through WhatsApp, to try to build some sort of communication or start a communication. And I would reply. It's sort of like, what else am I supposed to do? Yeah. So after I had that conversation with my dad and I went home, of course, that was the only thing I could think about. And my dad did reach out through WhatsApp, to see like how my day is going. What am I up to? sort of also share little things that are happening in his life, sort of like an IG stories, but through WhatsApp. Just like I'm in this location, I'm in this place for business here and there. He's putting in effort, definitely. And I told myself that I should do the same and just see it through. Like, who knows what's going to happen if you start talking to him again. And I want to say like the real forgiveness probably came 3 or 4 months later. It's just and it was just a feeling. Like, I don't remember the day, I don't remember the time, but it was just this sense of relief, weight off my shoulders, weight off my heart. That it's all okay now. Whatever happened in the past, we'll leave there, and let's just look forward. Really.
And what about your brother? Like, what was his reaction after this meeting? You know, did you talk about it on the way home? What happened on his side of things?
So the image that comes to mind is that after the conversation and my brother was driving us back home, my brother was sort of telling me, like, don't believe everything he said. So, like, he has his side, but don't take it as that's exactly what happened. And this is all, of course, translating sort of like Chinese, Cantonese to English. And sort of he can manipulate things, and he can manipulate stories. So that's correct. My brother actually lived with my mom and dad in the same household, which is not something I've ever experienced, a nuclear family. But I also thought about this, and maybe I thought about this later, but you knew him in that time. What is dad like today? Have things changed? And not just doubt, not just be careful about what he said, but I need to be careful about what my mom says, about what you said, because we all carry these biases, and it's sort of up to me to take what I want, with enough evidence, of course, and then so carry that story through. But we've never spoken about that day afterwards at all.
So your existing relationship with your dad exists in its own kind of WhatsApp chat, and your brother has his own going on?
That is exactly what happens. Two different chats. Him and my brother, my dad meaning, they have a very different relationship. It's a lot about like, hey, here's what I'm doing, and like, here's what I saw on the news, and just sort of this conversation about maybe career and like professionalism. My dad and I, we talk more about, these days at least, we talk more about like health, wellness, in addition to sort of emerging technology and career. But I feel like for me, I don't need that professional or career guidance from him. I just want like a parent, really. Well, what is a parent? And then my brain's now going to like, well, what is a parent? But I think I just want to build some baseline relationship, and sort of keep it away from career, because I have great resources here in Ontario. I will add one thing to this story, and I don't know how this fits in when it's edited in post. But as a child, I did watch, like, my favorite show on A&E was Gene Simmons' Family Jewels. There was an episode where he went back to Israel to look for his father. And it was very emotional. His father had passed away. His father also abandoned his mom. I don't know why I'm getting choked up on his story. But there was that scene, there was that moment. And he he was too late. And I didn't want that to happen to me.
What I keep taking away from this story is just your boundless maturity or ability to look past things that some people hold on to for their entire lives. I don't think that's normal behavior for a 22-year-old at the time, or even a full-grown adult.
I would accredit that to my mom, I think. Just sort of, was very angry, and even at that time, 22, still held that very near to her heart, and thought about the past. But I think that's how she would have wanted me to take things. um I think I never lashed out or like never did that stuff because I knew that no one else would be there for my mom.
And did your mom know that this meeting was taking place, that you were going to meet your dad after so long?
My mom did know. She just knew it was happening. She didn't know for what, and she was sort of like, "Oh, like what do you have to say to him? Like, there's nothing to say." Uh, and then afterwards, she was just like, "So how'd it go?" And I just said it was okay.
And right now, looking at your life, do you feel like all those feelings are resolved?
They're as resolved as they can be in 2025. I'm at a different stage. Like, I'm not 5 years old. I'm not coming of age. I've sort of established who I am, my identity, and things I like to do. And so those key points in my life that I think a child would want a parent, I have already gone through that. And so in that regards, like the child needs, and please, I'm not a child psychologist, I haven't studied this stuff, but I think my needs as a kid and when I wanted a father, those have all been resolved because my mom ended up doing everything. um, Today, even, I guess a side story is I went back to Hong Kong to visit my father a few years ago, and seeing photos of when things broke down and his life carrying on was very hard for me.
You mean seeing your dad kind of continue on while the three of you were left suffering at some level?
Never thought of it that way with that word, but I'm going to roll with it because struggling, but I think that might be the right word. I'm just playing it down. But yeah, seeing those photos, seeing him and his partner around the time where I needed him, hurt a lot, to say the least. And when I visited him a few years ago, like I cried that night. But again, that morning I said, "Hey, he had to do what he had to do. We carried on."
And Edward, when you think about what you want for your family and your future, what comes to mind?
Even as a kid, I knew I never want to put anyone, meaning a mother or a child, through what I went through. Sorry, I wouldn't want to put anyone through that, and so I sort of told myself that if and when you become a father, that you vow to never do this because you know how it feels. And this happened in like grade 7. Like that was my thinking in grade 7 that, hey, like do not do this to anyone. Um, and I think when I do become a father, one of the things that I always think about is to be present. Work can happen, and I'm very fortunate, and I want to acknowledge this, that I live in North America. I live in Canada, where it's actually okay to take time off to see your child's terrible recital, do things for your kids. And that's exactly what I want to do, because in that culture, especially in Hong Kong and China, you're expected to work 6 days a week. You're expected to put overtime. You're expected to leave the office at like 10:30, right? And that's not.
But you also mentioned at the beginning that you admired your dad for his focus on his career, right?
That is correct. As I started to work more and get a little older, I'm like, yeah, you know what? I get it. I get it. You had to do this thing. It was something that drove you to be better, career wise, and maybe people in that culture are more attached to their job, and that does become their identity. And that's one thing that even I've carried with me, that it's okay to care about work, but don't forget about home. Is then the other side of it. So I do look up to him. I admire how he pursued his MBA at a very, I don't want to say old age, but a later stage in his career. And I admire how he's still working as like I think almost like 65. He's still consulting for emerging, insurance tech companies in Asia, and that is just something so amazing to see from afar. Uh, do I wish that he was there? Yes, but he's still here now, and I have to make the most of it, despite how awkward it is, and despite how uncomfortable it feels. If there's anything to take away, is everything in life takes effort, and it takes effort on both parties to make a relationship, a bond work. Yeah.
So, Edward, to people listening who have maybe been through a similar experience or are going through it, what would you want to tell them?
I think this is sort of now like my product brain going. I think we're really fortunate in the time of 2025 where there are a lot more resources out there, to be that ear for you and to be that person that you need. Uh, I don't know if I should say this. I'm just going to say this because I sort of word vomit and speak from the heart. I suck at listening to my own advice. Like, I would never listen to my own advice. But I would really hope that someone going through what I went through can find the support, through local programs, or if you have the means to, is to seek out therapy. Like, go get help, go get professional help. I'm just one person that decided to do it in their own brain, and it could have went left or it could have went right. And I just ended up doing okay by doing that. But I think it's really important to seek professional help, and make sure that you feel heard and that you don't do anything too drastic, that would hurt not only yourself but others around you. So please, please, please find someone to be there for you, and vocalize it. Another tangent. I'm really bad at communicating, even in my personal life, even though I have to do this for work. And it's really important that you establish it's okay to communicate. Like, people do want to be there. People do want to talk to you and hear how you're doing. And that's one thing that I will say. And now the other part of my brain's like, get into music. Music is such a great therapy. And I remember I had a friend in university who wanted to become like an art therapist. I was like, what is that? That was more through painting and sculpture. But I think there is a lot of great music therapy. One of the things that I've always wanted to do was to actually find programs, or like find a program or build a program to help kids that are in some situations, and to channel it through music. And whether it's pop, whether it's rock, find an instrument, find music, and express yourself. Now, sorry, my head is going on another decision tree and branch. I think what's really great about music, and channeling that is, sorry, not even that. Let me start over. When I think about universal basic income, I do believe that people will sort of not do anything, but I feel like it's in human nature to express yourself and create something. And I think when you start to create something, whether it's through instruments, painting, or sculpture, or building things, you're going to find this level of satisfaction and happiness. And I hope that if you're going through something, and if you're expressing yourself through an instrument, that you feel it. You feel the vibration. The instrument is resonating through your bones and through your flesh, and that you feel comfortable to mutter, sing, whisper some lyrics that you're going through. And hopefully that can make you feel a little better within the hour, and carry that into the next 12 hours, 24, week, month, and sort of take you through what I went through, which is music is just basically my life, and something that I hold on to dearly.
So, Edward, when I invited you on this podcast, I didn't know what story you would come forward with. I know you in a professional capacity. We used to work together, and I feel like you were really good at maintaining like appropriate professional distance. What made you bring this story to me today?
What made me want to tell this story was to hopefully touch one person and have them know that what you're going through sucks. It really does suck. And if you can find ways to express yourself and communicate and find help, whether it's helping yourself or finding external help, that you could get through it. And the grass maybe the grass is greener. It's not the right phrase here, but everything will be okay, and time mends things, and there's only so much that you can control. And hopefully by hearing the story, you know that there are other people, and just not just me. There's probably millions out there going through the same thing, and it's all going to be okay. It's really the short and sweet of it. It's all going to be okay.
Edward, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your story. I know you've already achieved your goal of touching one person with it, and I'm sure this won't be where it ends. Really appreciate it, and I'm honored to be able to listen. Thank you.
Thank you, Adina.
Thanks for listening to Tell Me a Story. Let me know what you think, and like, comment, subscribe. You know the drill.